So much can go wrong, so much often does go wrong, that it was kind of surprising that this was just a perfect day for Max Verstappen and Red Bull Honda. Congratulations to them. A superlative drive, really, and a great performance by the team. Makes you wonder, and I go right back to the start of the 2020 season now, when gasping for breath up and down the stairs in my office, I was thinking that Max would be in very good shape this year with the team. And so therefore it makes you wonder where they've been all year. Where they've partly been, of course, is making a few bad starts due to glitches on the car, maybe Honda related or not, but certainly obviously Mugello stands out as a very good example of that. So they've had a few of those, but they've also had days when they just haven't been able to match the Mercedes performance factor, particularly the Lewis Hamilton Mercedes performance factor. And yet today, forget it, they were just in another class, Red Bull, that is. So how to give Max Verstappen's win in Abu Dhabi the true credit that it deserves? It's very easy, I think, to write off races like this and say, well, it wasn't very exciting, it was pretty boring, Mercedes weren't really there, they won the championship, easy day for Max. But of course, it's never easy, and there's always much more going on behind the scenes. For me, there's one stat that really stands out from the Grand Prix today, and particularly from Max Verstappen's drive, and that is, if you take the lap time of, let's say, 1:41.5, which is a really quick time in race conditions around the Marina circuit. If you take that as a sort of race-winning, consistent lap time, Max Verstappen did 31 laps today at 41.5 and below. By comparison, Valtteri Bottas only did 15 laps at 41.5 and below, and Lewis Hamilton and Alex Albon, who finished third and fourth, only 8 laps at that sort of pace. So that gives you an idea of how fast Max Verstappen was. There were 2 occasions when Mercedes got on the radio to Valtteri Bottas and said, one was before he came in for the switch to hard tyres, one was after when he was on the hard, saying, okay, Valtteri, now's the moment, give it everything you've got, green light, go for it. And on both occasions, the next lap, Max was 0.3 quicker than Valtteri Bottas. Very, very impressive performance. And if you look at the consistency of Max Verstappen during that race, it was almost incredible. It was predictable, really, the next lap he was going to drive. 41.3, 41.4, 41.4, 41.2, 41.4. Just metronomic. And you could say, well, you know, pretty boring, going on, winning the race, impossible to overtake. But that isn't fair, because this was, as I've used this phrase before, this was the epitome of the art. This was dominating a race from the pole and setting fastest lap and responding to anything that was thrown at him. And he was the first also to come out on the radio and say, whilst on the hard tyre around lap 25, I'm not sure these tyres are going to go through to the finish, hoping, of course, that he would lure Mercedes into making a stop. Mercedes counterpunched pretty quickly with Lewis Hamilton saying, 2 laps later, I'm not sure these tyres are going to be good for the finish. But of course they were, and that hard Pirelli tyre turned out to be as good a race tyre we've seen from the Italian company all year. You could punish it, and it went a long way too. And we first saw that on the Friday with Sergio Perez's very impressive long run at the back end of free practice too. As for Sergio, and we got to talk about him because potentially we aren't going to see him in Formula One again. I hope that's not the case, but it could well be, knowing the way Formula One is and how quickly things change in this sport. Sergio was going very well from the back of the grid. He had a bit of a skirmish early on with Kevin Magnussen, as you do, and he let him go going into the chicane. But it was obvious that he had the pace, and it was obvious that he was heading for a very, very good top 10 finish. And he had the 2 Ferraris inside. He was closing on Charles Leclerc, who'd been outgunned by Sebastian Vettel on the opening lap, and the Ferraris were running in tandem. And he was catching the Ferraris quite well when suddenly the replacement Mercedes power unit just died, and he pulled up the side of the circuit, walked away, got into a golf cart and drove back to the paddock. Very sad end, you could say, but so good for Sergio, so good for his country, so good for his supporters that he did have that win in Sakhir to take home now and to think about for the rest of his life probably. So that meant, just as an aside, that Racing Point then were relying on Lance Stroll for a really good result to retain 3rd place in the Constructors' Championship, and that didn't happen courtesy of Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz, both of whom drove blinding races today, absolutely fabulous. Lando Norris, so quick. He was ahead of Alex Albon in the early phase of the race, really good in defense, and then very consistent thereafter. He finished 5th behind Albon, and Carlos Sainz also drove really well to finish 6th. And that gave McLaren 3rd place in the Constructors' Championship, well deserved. And this, of course, is their last race with the Renault engine. Next year, they're switching to the Mercedes. But an interesting result, bearing in mind the drivers finished only 6th and 9th in the Drivers' Championship. Just shows what reliability can do if you've got both cars consistently scoring points. Anyway, back to the front. And I think the last word about this win should go to Honda for the engine they produce. Yeah, they've had a few glitches, and yeah, they had a really difficult restart in Formula One with McLaren. And it's kind of ironic, I guess. We've got to connect a few dots here, but in the race where McLaren went really well with the Renault engine and finished 3rd in the championship, normally you'd say, wow, what a great decision for us to have left Honda and go to Renault. But on the same day, Honda won yet another Grand Prix with Red Bull. So it still makes you wonder if McLaren had used the relationship with Honda more efficiently, better if you like, whether they too might have been winning races by now. But that's another story. It'll never happen. It's hypothetical. And next year McLaren, of course, will be at Mercedes, and they'll be really strong with Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris. But speaking of the good Daniel, Renault did a very good job with him. They put him on the hard tyre at the start, ran him right through to lap 40. That's only 15 to go, and then they put him on the medium. Daniel was one of the few drivers not to stop during the safety car conditions brought out by the Sergio Perez retirement. The 2 Ferraris were 2 other cars not to stop as well. And he drove really well. Having gained that track position, he never really lost anything, and he finished a very, very good 7th. The question that arises then is why more runners didn't choose to start on the hard tyre. And this isn't me saying after the event, wow, that was a good strategy by Daniel Ricciardo. It's me saying, as we saw on Friday, that long run by Sergio Perez on the hard tyre showed how good that white Pirelli is and what a good race tyre it was going to be. I was astounded, to be honest, that more runners below the top 10 didn't go for the Daniel Ricciardo hard tyre strategy. Most of them started on mediums and then went to the hard. But Daniel's race, I think, could have been driven by a number, particularly Charles Leclerc. I don't understand what was going on at Ferrari. With his 3-place grid penalty, he was alongside Sebastian Vettel on the grid, and you would have thought at that moment, yeah, you got Sebastian on the hards and a very good call there, and he drove really well. In fact, he got in front of Charles going into at the end of the first lap. But Charles was on the medium tyre. I didn't get that at all. But if you're on the medium, okay, fair enough. He's going to have some grip early on, but he didn't really use that. He wasn't able to use it. He was behind Sebastian Vettel. Then the safety car came out, and they kept Charles out. I mean, it's logical to keep a driver like Ricciardo or Vettel out on the hard tyre, but if you got Leclerc on the medium, why would you leave him out? After that, of course, he sunk like a stone, and he probably delivered only 2/3 of what was the potential of that car today as a result. Yeah, as they crossed the line on the last lap, he was ahead of Sebastian Vettel, but it could have been much more from Charles Leclerc. Very strange strategy, I thought, from Ferrari on his car. Under the heading of why haven't Max Verstappen and Red Bull won more races like that this year, the answer is, well, quite often they've been ahead of Valtteri Bottas, and they've certainly matched Bottas's pace, but often it's been the Lewis-Hamilton-Mercedes combination that has been the winning factor. But on this day, Lewis was not there to play the game. He is recovering, of course, from testing positive for COVID-19, and he said after the race it was a really, really tough race for him physically. As they climbed into the cars after the pre-race ceremonies, the first thing Lewis said was, don't forget to remind me every quarter distance of the race to take a drink. And that gave you an inkling that he was concerned about his physiology. And so it went on. He did drive well. He was quick, but once he got within 2 seconds of Valtteri, 3 seconds of Valtteri, the grip would go away, and he just had to sit there waiting to see if anything was going to happen. When the safety car came out after 10 laps, when Sergio Perez retired the Racing Point, Lewis was the first to get on the radio and say, well, you know, those tyres were feeling pretty good. I'm not sure we should have come in and changed. I should have got track position. But then he went into a description a lap later of how the car had not been handling very well, and he didn't have a balance. So overall, I think you'd have to say Mercedes probably made the right call. Although it would, of course, have been interesting to see Lewis with adrenaline up leading the race because he'd got track position on the medium tyre, which he'd been, let's face it, not very quick in the early stages. So in theory, there was still quite a lot of energy left in that tyre. But that didn't happen. Mercedes brought him in for the hard tyre. There were no no issues this time with the stacked pit stops. And thereafter, things stayed really very much as they were. On lap 36, Lewis made a small mistake and flat spotted the tyre, which really put an end to any sort of proactive challenge he could make. So for Lewis, it was a question then of backing away and making sure he finished third. Alex Albon was fourth for Red Bull Honda. A good result. He was very quick, or pretty quick, relative to Max late in the race, but early on he wasn't really there. He just took a few laps to get past Lando. They were both on the soft tyre. And then he pulled away, looked pretty good. But then when he was running fourth, he was usually 2 to 3 to 4 tenths of a second a lap slower than Lewis, conserving the tyres, looking after everything. And as I say, it was only in the closing stages, when his tyres were in better shape than Lewis's, that he started to close that gap a little. So good result for him, although you would have thought, again, I don't want to keep saying this, I'm not massively anti-Alex Albon, but it depends what Red Bull need from their second driver. But you would think in a car that was good enough to have won the Grand Prix today, that the other driver might have finished third, or perhaps even second. The Red Bull was a really, really good car around the Yas Marina circuit today, but probably Red Bull will go away and think, yeah, nice harmonious team. We're getting the best from Max because we don't have a teammate who's giving him too hard a time, and we can just mold the whole team around his personality and the way he wants to go racing. And I think we saw today a Max Verstappen in control, calm, relaxed, enjoying his life in a way that he never was when he was consistently winning races with Red Bull a few years ago. This is a Max that is now evolving from all those difficult days when he's finished second or third with a car that wasn't capable of winning a race, and which most drivers would have brought home in fourth or fifth, like Alex Albon, and he's got a P2 or a P3 out of it, a really hard graft day. And that sort of road dust adds up after a while. And when you do get the opportunity again, and when it is your chance to win again, you're on the pole, the Mercedes is starting to fall away behind you, that is when a new level of maturity comes along. And I think we saw that with Max Verstappen today. And that's a great thing, of course, to be going into the winter with, certainly from Max's point of view. Speaking of going into the winter, Valtteri Bottas, after the race, was saying, well, spend some time with the family, spend some time with the team, and then it'll be rebooting everything back to zero and starting again and doing a better job. I still think he can get out there and possibly even take it to Lewis in a Nico Rosberg type way, but it isn't going to happen if he remains the same Valtteri Bottas. He's got to make serious changes to the way he works on his driving, and probably also from a psychological point of view as well, and what he needs to do in order to slightly discombobulate Lewis Hamilton. Just an idea off the top of my head. What if Valtteri announced that he was going to be managed by, I don't know, Nico Rosberg, and he had Nico Rosberg standing on his side of the garage throughout the 2021 season? I'm not sure Lewis would be too moved by that, but nonetheless, it would be making some sort of statement, would it not? Anyway, that's the sort of thing I'm thinking of. I think Valtteri needs to make quite serious changes if he's going to start really winning races again for Mercedes. And looking a little bit further down the results, very good drive by Pierre Gasly to finish 8th. He was really aggressive in the early laps, passing his teammate Daniel Kvyat. Esteban Ocon was 9th, but Daniel Ricciardo was the Renault star for the day, and Lance Stroll finished 10th. He made pretty heavy weather of trying to pass Sebastian Vettel when he had much newer tyres and looked fairly ineffective all day. A rather surprising end of season for Lance Stroll after looking pretty strong at various points of the year. Kimi Räikkönen finished P12, not too bad after a really bad qualifying session, didn't even get into Q2. And George Russell went from almost winning the Sakhir Grand Prix for Mercedes to finishing a very strong P15 for Williams Mercedes. That's all you could get out of a Williams, and George got it. Drove really well, under the radar, of course, today. But George, we haven't forgotten what you did in Bahrain, and there'll be plenty more of those to come, hopefully in the not too distant future. So that was Abu Dhabi, that was 2020. Congratulations to the world champions, Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes. Congratulations to the winner of today's race, Max Verstappen and Red Bull Honda. We'll be back with plenty more video in the weeks to come. Look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, take care and stay safe.